Good evening, everybody. It's Adrian Bridge from Taylor's Port, joining you once again from here in the beautiful city of Porto. Today we've got an opportunity to taste some more fine port after yesterday's wonderful opening of vintage port with Coravan. We've kind of decided a little bit of a mood change and have a little bit of the old Tawny port, in this case the 30-year-old Tawny, which of course is one of the rarer of the old Tawny ports that we make, simply because the people have a sort of 10, 20 and then think of the 40, and that 30-year-old in between the 20 and 40 always tends to be a slightly different taste profile. We historically always made our 30-year-old a little bit drier than either the 20 or the 40. So it's nice to taste this. I don't get to taste it that often. What's going to happen this evening is it's really all about my guest who's joining, who we're going to have an opportunity to hear all about what's happening in France. I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Philippe Guigal, who with his father is probably the most important people in the Rhone Valley, and certainly makers of fabulous wines. Philippe, it's lovely to see you there. Welcome to this conversation.
Lovely to see you.
So tell me, how's everything in there with you in France?
As you might know, there's a terrible issue in France, as in many other European countries, with the COVID disease, and the French authorities have divided France into two zones: a green zone and a red zone. And according where you are, you have more or less freedom, if I may say. And being very close from Lyon, which is the second largest city in France, I was personally convinced that we would be in a red zone, and for my biggest surprise, we are in a green zone. So let's say we started a little deconfinement on Monday, slowly but surely, and we keep the fingers crossed for the weeks and the days to come, but things are okay.
Fantastic. Well, it's good to hear that, and I assume all of your family are well, and all of you locked up there in the chateau along the edge of the river in some degree of comfort.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. The vineyards are not far away. We can spend some time outside. We're very lucky.
Yeah, very good indeed. And to tell us, how is the growing season going there for you?
The 2020 season, talking about the crop, we have started the season in November and December with a lot of rain. And of course, we love when the season starts with a lot of rain, because we can make a little bit of reserve for the rest of the year. Then came a very mild winter. And we can say that the real winter started a little bit late, so end of February, beginning of March. We've seen a little bit of frost here, of course, before any leaves or any birds. But we don't have snow generally here, and we had no snow, but we had a little bit of frost, -5, -7 degrees Celsius, and then came a fantastic spring. And everybody was locked at home, and it's one of the best and the nicest spring I've ever seen. Nature is fantastic. We live next to the Rhone River, and it's very impressive to see how the water of the Rhone River became extremely clear, crystal clear, and it's like a nature renaissance these days, because of everybody being locked in their homes. So. The beginning of the season is good. We are a little bit worried by the fact that it went extremely fast, and we are at least 2 weeks ahead, if not 3 weeks ahead, depending if we are talking about the northern or the southern Rhone. So in northern Rhone, I would say 3 weeks ahead, because believe it or not, the Viognier in Condrieu is flowering right now, which is not exactly the right season for the Viognier to start the flowers. In Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the first Grenache, the old vines Grenache from the best sectors of Lacroix, started the flowering beginning of this week as well. So it's 2 weeks early in the southern Rhone, and in some places 3 weeks earlier in the north. The size of the crop is quite big in the south, which is unexpected because it was quite big last year as well. And it's very rare in Châteauneuf-du-Pape to see 2 big crops in a row, but it seems to be the case until now in Châteauneuf for the Grenache. And in northern Rhône, with Syrah and Viognier right now, it is, I would say, a comfortable crop, but nothing is done yet. So we keep the fingers crossed.
Okay, well, that's excellent news. It's quite interesting here in Portugal. We had, in the Douro Valley, we had a very early bud burst. We're flowering at the moment, but where the bud burst had been a couple of weeks earlier than the average for the last couple of decades, we've seemed to have caught up again because we've had some cool weather in May. We're in a very extraordinary year because we here in Portugal have been having cooler weather, a day of sun, a day of rain, but cooler general conditions. And yet, in Northern Europe, and I know all the way up in where my son is, living at the moment in London and traveling to work every day in London, but they've been having extraordinary weather up there and a very early spring and warm conditions. So a little bit of turbulence all over the place, but certainly the cooler weather we've had for the end of April and early May has actually brought us back now more in line with what we would normally expect here in the Douro Valley. So we'd originally been thinking we'd be harvesting at the very end of August, and it now looks like we'll be not starting harvest till about the 10th, 11th of September. So that's already a change that's taken place.
It has delayed a little bit, whereas we will have to be ready, I think, for the whites, for the Viognier by the end of August, if it carries on this way. But once again, it's a little bit early, so we will see. For sure, we will not travel far away because we wouldn't be allowed to during the summer holidays. So we'd be very close to the vineyards.
Yeah, well, fantastic. And of course, as you're there in Château d'Ampuis, along the edge of the Rhône River, you are, as you say, in sight of many of your fabulous vineyards. But tell me, what's interesting that you as a business, which sort of reach all across the globe, have an incredibly popular following in Asia with many, many fans. You and I have spent time together in China talking to consumers. Tell us how Asia is perhaps coming back, or if indeed it is.
We see, let's say, very different situations in Asia. We see that the countries that have been hardly hit by the coronavirus are recovering, but slowly. So we see, growth, but very slow growth, step by step. Whereas countries like South Korea or Japan that have been affected, of course, but probably less than their neighbors, the figures never dropped, and the sales are steady and good. So it very much depends in the way the pandemic has affected the countries. We can say that, generally speaking, a lot of people, like you and I, drank a lot of wine during the confinement. So we can say that, generally speaking, the consumption of wines has grown, of course. There is one exception, and I'm, of course, sad about this exception. It is, once again, the French paradox. In France, we didn't see the figures, the selling figures growing, for a very simple reason. French people normally have comfortable cellars, and people drank their stocks. So they didn't buy wines outside, and they definitely emptied their cellar during the confinement. We are ready now to refill the cellars of the French.
Of course.
Because most of the cellars are empty in France right now, but it's a big difference if you compare this with the United States, for example. If you compare this with Norway, with Sweden, with Finland, where or Canada, for example, where the sales have been extremely strong during the confinement because people, got interest in relaxing a little bit at home.
Well, yeah, but it's an interesting point you make. But I think a lot of people who have perhaps been putting wines in their cellar, storing it for some special occasion, have, as you say, gone in, discovered a corkscrew, got their caravan out, tasted through some wonderful old wines, and I think probably have fallen back in love with great wine, because there's those special things that you always had for a very special occasion. Well, you've had a chance to taste it, and as you say, shortly you'll have a chance to refill the cellar again.
Absolutely, we hope so.
We hope so. Certainly. Tell us, you picked a glass up there, and it looked like it had something interesting in it. So, what are you drinking? Do you want a Viognier?
It is a Viognier. It is a Condrieu because there's no bad time for Condrieu. So it's 8:30 in France. It's not exactly aperitif time. I haven't had dinner yet, so I think it was a good thing to have a glass of Condrieu. We know each other for a long time, and you know that if it had not been a wine from the Rhone Valley, it could have probably been a vintage port, because in the family we are port lovers. And I think for French people, you know, a normal consumption of 48 bottles of vintage port a year is not bad at all.
Well, well, certainly. Thank you very much for your support to the port industry. I'm sure it's not only our wines, but many of the wines from our fellow.
You should not thank me. I should thank you for this.
No, and I know that you're a wine lover, so you're not only just tasting great vintage port from Taylor's, but you're probably having from Graham's or Wars or Fonseca or various other companies as well, because and that's one of the delights of wine, is the ability to taste widely and to encounter different house styles and just you know, really, as you say, enjoy all those flavors and often a lot of history. And your house has got a very interesting history, because your grandfather, I believe, was a great pioneer of growing grapes there after the Second World War.
Absolutely. You know, we are in a historical wine region, so I'm facing the vineyards of Côte-Rôtie, which is a very steep vineyard, but you're used to it in the Douro, and we grow grapes on these steep slopes for the past 2,400 years. So viticulture is dating back to Roman time here. There has been up and downs. The 18th century was probably a very good time and very prosperous time for the area. But if you combine the Philippe crisis and the First World War and World War II, we can say in the 50s, this vineyard was totally miserable. Maybe 40, 45 hectares for the vineyard of Côte-Rôtie, so almost nothing. And in our family, we've been very thankful to have my grandfather. Probably a lot of people were thinking he was crazy at the time, because there were not many people that were believing in the future of this appellation. But, you know, his idea was very simple. Things work in the area for the past 2,400 years, and there's no reason why it should stop because of a little insect or because of the wars. And, you know, we keep the same optimism for the pandemic that we all live today. Things have to carry on, of course.
Well, and they will do. And I think all of us actually have been appreciating nature and the way that it has suddenly sort of been able to recover. Somebody was kind enough to send me a picture earlier today from Venice. They literally took a picture of the Grand Canal, where the water is beautifully blue, as you say, like the Rhone River. It's gone clear. There was not a ripple, because there's no boats, there's no people, there's nothing. And you look at it and you think, we probably won't, and we hope we won't see it like that again in our lifetime with so little. But you do suddenly realize how beautiful the world is when everything has just suddenly stopped and nature is just back doing as it should.
And how important it is to take care of this beautiful nature. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. Now, last time I was with you there, we had a chance, and you were talking about history of 2,400 years. I had a chance to see some of your family's collection of Greek and Roman vessels, because like me, you also have a passion for this whole story of wine and its whole interaction with humankind over many, many centuries. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about one of your favorite pieces from that area.
You know, we share the same passion for collecting, let's say, Greek and Roman remains, if we can say. And we've achieved the dream of many collectors, because, you know, it took 35, 40 years to my father first. We carried on this together to collect all these beautiful things. And we thought it was a good timing to give the opportunity for people to discover this. So past January, we've opened what I would say is a cellar door, but it also includes a museum.
Mm-hmm.
And now people have the opportunity to see all these beautiful vessels from the Greek and the Roman time. Answering your question, when you look at the Greek culture about wine, you realize how sophisticated the Greeks were and how serious the Greeks were when it was about drinking wine. So there were a ceremony around the pouring of wine called the symposium. And I'm so glad, to show to people all the little vessels that were used at the Greek time, to collect the wine, to pour the wine, to mix the wine with water, because as you probably know, it was done this way at the time. So it's absolutely fantastic to go back more than 2,000 years ago and think of the people that were drinking and enjoying the wine at the time.
Well, and absolutely, and that's the point, isn't it? That wine has got such an important part of the conviviality, whether it's in a symposium, which my understanding of a lot of symposium was that people, the person holding it would invite his friends, get out his best wine, pour it for them, but then often deliver a sort of lecture or a thesis. So there was a sort of, as we'd say in Portuguese, a contrapartida. There was the other side. Yes, you got some fabulous wines, but on the other hand, you had to listen a lot to your host and his opinions at the time. So it could make for quite a fun evening. But I'm very delighted, actually, of course, to hear about your museum, because I think that's going to be, again, as we come out of this crisis, very important as people learn to travel again and rediscover first probably their own country. So I'd imagine you're going to see an awful lot of French people coming down into the Rhone to rediscover the beauty of their own country. And then, of course, later on, as international travel gets back together, that we can all come to see you and to see your museum, your cellar door, and just to learn about the richness of your region. But of course, most importantly, probably to taste your fabulous wines. I saw today that Vinexpo for Asia, where we were due to be together, I think in July, has now been moved to February next year. So, things are still being planned, and we still have the opportunity to join together around the world and show our fine wines, which is very exciting.
Yes, we have this great habit and great privilege to be together for the past, I think, 30 or almost 30 years. In Vinexpo Bordeaux at the time, Vinexpo Paris now, and Vinexpo Hong Kong. And I always say it's a true pleasure to be with you, because we share this same vision of high-end wines, and we share the same passion for what we do.
Yeah, it's great. So we're going to run out of time shortly. I just wondered if you could just want to say a few final messages to the people who are watching, or maybe a final thought.
Final thoughts, it's difficult times these days. So for sure, people might feel uncomfortable to move, to do things they used to do. I believe it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to realize that life can be made of very simple things. I am the proud father of two young boys, twin boys, they're 9 years old. And I feel so fortunate to have spent a lot of time, a good amount of time with them during the weekends, etc., during the confinement. So, simply life can be made of very simple things. And I think we have had the opportunity to live this unusual life. At this time of the year, I normally travel to the US or to Asia. I've not been able to do it. It's not a problem. I've spent more time in the vineyards. I've spent more time in the cellars, and you have to truly enjoy what the world gives you.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic to hear. And Philippe Guigal, who you and your family are making such great wines. It's a pleasure to have a chance to talk to you. I'm going to raise my glass of the Taylor's 30-year-old to you to say thank you so much for coming on this call. I've had this privilege of a backdrop of the town of Porto throughout our conversation. It's waiting for you, Philippe, to come and visit us with your wife, your children, your parents. We look forward to seeing you again. Take care and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I will do this as soon as I can, and à votre santé. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.